Just like the street lights lit this town, like a fire in a blaze, gotta burn it down.
Alright, here we are, folks.
Can't be afraid to leave this out. We got this far, don't know how. I see danger in us. They know we'll burn down the night. Coming just like the sunrise. You know that we're gonna light it up. Tonight, we're gonna light it up. Tonight, we're gonna light it up. Just like the sunrise, we're gonna light it up.
Welcome back once again. This is Chris Report, and he assured me that since Simon's down in Boulders, folks, this is Chris Wyatt reporting from South Africa. Good evening, folks. This is Chris live in central Pennsylvania with an update about Ireland, Israel, Gaza, and what's going on there. The Irish government has betrayed Israel's sovereignty and violated the United Nations Charter with a frivolous effort to support the African National Congress's ludicrous claim of genocide in Gaza. What are we talking about specifically? What's happening here, folks? Let's get into this very quickly. So, in the aftermath of the unprovoked Hamas invasion of sovereign Israeli territory on October 7th of 2023, there have been many pro-Palestinian marches across Ireland. Additionally, up until today, opposition parties have tried but failed to compel the government to refer Israel to the International Criminal Court and expel Israel's ambassador, Dana Ehrlich. Now, the International Criminal Court is inappropriate, but what they're trying to do is refer it to the International Court of Justice, ICJ. Over 600 academics, purported academics, signed a letter urging universities to sever institutional links with Israeli institutions in a malicious anti-Semitic move. Pro-terror attitude and anti-Semitism have been blatantly obvious in Ireland now for months. And now Ireland shames itself by joining the African National Congress' disgraceful abrogation of the United Nations Charter and attacking Israel at the International Court of Justice. Ireland said on Wednesday that it would intervene in South Africa's genocide case against Israel, in the strongest signal to date of Dublin's concern about Israeli operations in Gaza since October 7th. Of course, there have been no operations in Gaza since October 7th. The Israelis showed remarkable restraint in not launching an attack, giving Hamas weeks to surrender its terrorists who violated their sovereignty and invaded the Republic of Israel. Article 51 of the United Nations Charter says, and I quote, "Nothing in the present charter shall impair the inherent right of individual or collective self-defense if an armed attack occurs against a member of the United Nations, until the Security Council is taking measures necessary to maintain international peace and security." The Security Council has not intervened to crush or contain Hamas. They have intervened demanding Israel complete a ceasefire, despite the fact that Charter explicitly states that Israel has a right to self-defense if an armed attack occurs against it. Now let's put things in perspective here. Israel entered the United Nations on May 11th, 1949. Ireland did not enter the United Nations until December 14th, 1955, 5.5 years after Israel entered. Yet they had the audacity and cheek to demand Israel surrender its sovereignty to a terrorist attack. South Africa wasn't even in the United Nations owing to apartheid, finally readmitted in 1994, and has the cheek to do this. Now, in announcing the move, Foreign Minister Michael Martin, a clear hater of Israel, said while it was for the World Court to decide whether genocide has been committed, he wanted to be clear that Hamas's October 7th attack and what's happening in Gaza now represents a blatant violation of international humanitarian law on a mass scale. The taking of hostages, the purposeful withholding of humanitarian assistance to civilians, that's a lie. That's not happening. The targeting of civilians and civilian infrastructure, not happening. The indiscriminate use of explosive weapons in populated areas, not happening. The use of civilian objects for military purposes, that is happening by Hamas. The collective punishment of the entire population, no, the collective population of Israel was punished by the terrorists who invaded on October 7th. But Martin wants to conflate and confuse the issue here. There's no such activity going on. The Israeli Defense Force is not targeting unlawful, the Israeli Defense Force is targeting unlawful combatants on the battlefield who are in violation of the law of land warfare and the Geneva Conventions. Israel has committed no violations. The only question here is a question of proportionality. If Ireland truly cared about the Palestinians, it would demand that Hamas terrorists give up their arms and surrender immediately, rather than conduct attacks from schools, clinics, and residential areas. But the Irish government is silent on the use of schools, clinics, hospitals, and residential areas by Hamas terrorists in attacking Israel. Now, Hamas is winning a strategic communications victory here, courtesy of Ireland and the Biden regime. And it comes as no surprise. Anti-Semitic attacks against Israel have been pronounced since Israel thumped the Arabs in 1967. They stopped being the underdog. Now, Gillian Wahaba Majid, the Palestinian ambassador to Ireland, said the Irish people are passionate about Palestine. They really understand what's happening. I'm privileged to be here. Well, you are privileged to be there. You are very privileged to be there. But I'm sure you don't appreciate that. Now, she said this last November. The Irish people are passionate about Palestine. They really understand what's happening. No, they don't. They're absolutely clueless based on their actions. Sympathy for Palestinians is, according to Niall Holohan, rooted in Ireland's history. Of course, he's a retired diplomat. He served in Ramallah from 2002 to 2006 as the Irish government's representative to the Palestinian Authority. He said, "We feel we've been victimized over the centuries. It's part of our psyche. Underneath it all, we side with the underdog." Yeah, well, Ireland first was the first European Union state to endorse Palestinian statehood back in 1980. Back in November, this foreign minister, Martin, visited a kibbutz that was targeted on October 7th, met with Israeli and Palestinian leaders. He called the Hamas attack savage and reiterated a plea for a ceasefire in Gaza, saying Israel's belief in a military solution was mistaken. Really? Well, that's the solution that Hamas took on October 7th. Now, ironically, the Irish largely stood with Israel from its inception, probably because of their antipathy towards Great Britain. But the return of Judea after Israel thumped the Arabs in the 1967 Six-Day War, and when Israel was forced to invade Lebanon to stop attacks being fired from Lebanon in Israel in the 1982 war, turned the tide against Israel. Of course, 1982 is the turning point when leftists in America became anti-Semitic and betrayed Israel as well, because Israel is no longer the underdog, it was now attacking its neighbors in their view. Maurice Cohen, chair of the Jewish Representative Council of Ireland, said late last year that the Irish mood has morphed into the narrative that while the Irish fought to remove the occupiers, so too are the Palestinians trying to remove the occupiers. Of course, the problem with that, folks, is that Israel's not occupying anything. The Gaza Strip is under the control of Palestinians and has been fully since 2005. The Gays for Gaza and the Israel out of Gaza crowd really don't know the facts. Israel abandoned Gaza and left it to the Palestinian Authority. And the Palestinian Authority is running it. And of course, the Palestinians there voted Hamas into government in 2008, I believe it was. And they've been in charge ever since. Of course, they've suspended elections since then, and they run it as their own fiefdom. Of course, the people responsible for running it for Hamas are actually living high off the hog after billions of dollars given to them by people who support their idiotic cause. Yes, they are not in any harm's way, not in any jeopardy. But Hamas launched this conflict. They went across the border. They attacked innocent civilians. They gang raped. They shot women in the head. They cut their breast off. They stuck bayonets in their genitals. They put babies in ovens in a vile look to what happened to Jews during the Second World War in the final solution, the Endlösung. Yeah. Unbelievable, the horrific conduct of Hamas on October 7th. Israel is justified in defending itself. It is under the United Nations Article 51 of the UN Charter clearly able to defend itself. And this is a shameful piece of action by not only the African National Congress, but by Ireland. Once again, neither Ireland nor South Africa joined the Gambia's International Court of Justice suit against Myanmar for its genocide against the Rohingya in 2019. Neither one of them joined it. But now both betray Israel's right to self-defense. In the Rohingya case, there was no question of self-defense. The Rohingya were not attacking the government or the territory of Myanmar. But here, Hamas terrorists, thousands of them, illegally crossed the border, invaded Israel on October 7th, butchered 1,200 people, and took 200 hostages. Yet Ireland sides with Hamas, demanding a ceasefire so that Hamas can re-equip, rearm, retrain, refit, and relaunch its attacks against civilians. Now, Ireland last week took the step of joining Spain, Malta, and Slovenia in recognizing statehood declared by Palestinians in the Israeli-occupied West Bank and in the Gaza Strip. Now, the problem, of course, is that Judea, as I said previously, erroneously called the West Bank, is not occupied. It was recaptured from Jordanian occupation in 1967 by Israel. The West Bank does not exist. Judea is what exists on the western bank of the Jordan River. No such thing as the West Bank. That was part of the territory that was given to Transjordan, a country overwhelmingly populated by Palestinians. It's Judea, not the West Bank. Actually, Hester, a lot of them do stand by Palestine, and it has been the case for a long time. It's a sentiment widespread in Israel, in Ireland, excuse me. The shameful conduct of Ireland now joining South Africa's ludicrous, ridiculous lawsuit against Israel. South Africa's African National Congress perhaps should pay more attention to its failure to condemn the invasion of Ukraine, its support for the totalitarian fascist Vladimir Putin, and its failure to address the genocide of the Rohingya in Myanmar, the genocide of the Uyghurs in communist China, the ongoing conflict between the RSF and government forces in Sudan, leading to the displacement of millions of people and the deaths of tens of thousands in Sudan, where black Africans killing black Africans. But of course, that's of zero interest to the African National Congress. Nor are the conflicts in the Sahel. In Niger, where a military junta overthrew a democratically elected government, South Africa has nothing to say. In Mali, where a military junta overthrew a government, South Africa has nothing to say. In Burkina Faso, which is under assault by jihadists, South Africa has nothing to say. In Nigeria, where the farmer-pastoral conflict continues unabated for years and thousands have died, people being kidnapped left and right, children abducted, women sold as sex slaves, and people murdered by terrorists, South Africa has nothing to say. Right there at home in South Africa, or in Africa, excuse me. South Africa's ANC doesn't care about people of color. They only care about power, craven power, and money. And the question here is, where is the ANC getting its money from? Why is the ANC able to send a team of dozens of lawyers and government officials to The Hague to prosecute a frivolous case against a sovereign state of Israel when 85 South Africans per day are murdered, women are raped in massive numbers, taxi wars, broad daylight gangland shootings and assassinations of government officials and taxi bosses, and farm invasions, the murder of farm workers, farm managers, and farmers? Where is South Africa's ANC's concern for these people who are actually Africans? Black, brown, white Africans. It's non-existent. South Africa had nothing to say about the conflict in Tigray, inside of Ethiopia, as Abe's government sought to crush, murder, starve, and execute Tigrayans. We've seen the video footage. We've seen the aftermath of Tigrayan soldiers who surrendered and were executed, shot in the back of the head by Ethiopian forces. No human rights investigation by Human Rights Watch to speak of, nothing spoken about here in large measure by Amnesty International, and nothing from the United Nations Human Rights Coordinator. Where are the investigations into Ethiopia being spearheaded by South Africa? They're non-existent because the ANC is a fraud. It is selective in its outrage. Its anti-Semitic attack against Israel is quite obvious here. Its silence in China, its silence in Myanmar, speak volumes about the ANC, who claim to hold the moral high ground. Either you oppose all oppression and government abuse, or you oppose none. You cannot be selective in your outrage. The ANC is selective in its outrage because the outrage that it's outraged about suits its needs and likely gets funding from their paymasters who seek to confuse the world. That's the bottom line here, folks. The Irish have betrayed Israel. And it's not surprising. Ireland is led by a cabal of woke leftists who are sick Euro lovers. They love the European Union. They do. They love their subsidies from the European Union. They love the rules that hamper other European economies to the benefit of the Irish. Yeah, the Irish politicians love that. Yep. And of course, the decision by the United Kingdom to leave the Eurozone only pissed off the Irish leaders even more, because it created a border controversy with the United Kingdom and the Republic of Ireland both inside the European Union. There was no friction at the Northern Ireland border. But now there is friction because the UK is not a member of the European Union, thank goodness, and Ireland remains. Ireland, the sponge, the recipient of hundreds of millions, if not billions of euros in handouts from the European Union. They love Brussels. They do. And now these leaders are using that money to attack a sovereign state in the International Court of Justice. The disgraceful behavior of Ireland. Really sad. I guess I'll have to put aside my Irish rugby jersey for the foreseeable future and stick to the Scotland jersey. Ignorance is bliss. Some people just swallow what mainstream media is telling them. People need to do some research, but it's easier to listen than read. Yeah, well, I hope people listen to me. Yeah, no. Ireland is selective here. They were already on October 7th calling for a ceasefire before Israel had even taken action against Hamas, ever invaded, because they knew it was coming. They knew that Palestine would be reduced to rubble. The Israelis forced to take a scorched earth approach because of the illegal combat, the unlawful combatant actions of Hamas, using schools, clinics, residential areas, hospitals as bases of operation and engaging Israel from there. This makes these things legitimate targets. The law of land warfare allows for attacks against places when they are misused by combatants and unlawful combatants. In this case, if Hamas uses a hospital for its operations, that is a legitimate target. The Israelis have a responsibility to do as little harm and not explicitly, intentionally target civilians. However, we've seen what's happened throughout this conflict when the Hamas terrorists and others fire rockets and they misfire and they land amongst their own people. They blame the Israelis for it. Listen, Israel, there's a question of proportionality here. At what point is enough enough? I would have conducted this conflict very differently than Israel. It would have been heavily reliant on special forces with close air support, UAVs, and jamming capabilities. That's what I would have done. I would have conducted it very differently. Israel it's their prerogative, it's their privilege to conduct this conflict in whatever way they feel necessary to eliminate this terror threat, this invasion that occurred on their soil. It is their prerogative. But Ireland and South Africa would have the Israelis withdraw and sit there and wait for the terrorists to return and murder more civilians. Ladies and gentlemen, the truth of the matter is this. Israel left Gaza in 2005, nearly 2 decades ago. And Hamas has run that territory almost exclusively since the early days. They weren't the first government in Gaza, but they've been running it since early on. They invaded Israel. They violated the state's sovereignty under Article 51 of the United Nations Charter. Israel is perfectly safe in defending itself against this attack. United Nations Security Council, Ireland, Jackass Joe's administration, and all those who voted for the ceasefire have betrayed Israel's sovereignty. This is why the United Nations is irrelevant. It's irrelevant. It does what leftists want, not what is for the good of humankind. And that's just a shame. Anyway, folks, I just wanted to break this news, talk a little bit about this. I'm sure not many people watch this. Not many people watch this, but that's fine. I don't shy away from telling the news and giving you the analysis here. Israel is a sovereign state. It entered the United Nations long before Ireland did, long before South Africa was readmitted. And it is adhering to the law of land warfare, the concept, the principle of proportionality. It's the one thing you could question, but even that, arguably, they're containing. When a non-combatant, when an unlawful combatant, when a combatant uses or misuses civilian infrastructure, it negates the protected status of such areas. It is fascinating to see the umbrage from Washington, from Moscow, from London, from Paris and from Beijing, from countries that bombed the living snot out of Germany, Japan, and others during the Second World War. The Soviets pummeled German cities. The Brits and Americans pummeled German cities. The Chinese, they were victims largely, or they would have pummeled Japan if they had the opportunity. They firebombed Dresden and killed 30,000 Germans, men, women, and children in a single night. The bomber Harris. This conduct was considered acceptable. Yet today, Israel's sovereignty is at risk, its citizens in jeopardy. And these same countries deign to tell Israel to stop defending itself. No, they're not, because Egyptians have closed the border and don't let anybody escape. And nobody's offered a boat lift. Notice how nobody in the European Union, France, England, Greece, Italy, none of them have brought their navies and their cruise ships to Gaza to take refugees away and take them to settle them in their lands, because they don't want them. They just want to condemn Israel and let the people who are citizens and residents, the Jews, the Christians, the Druze, the Muslims who live in Israel, be the victims of barbaric, inhumane, savage terrorist attacks by crazed Hamas terrorists. That's what they want. If these countries cared about these people, they would have evacuated them long ago. Pretty simple. The British Navy sails in. The Israeli Navy can't compete with it. I mean, if that's not enough, the French Navy goes with them, and the Italian Navy goes with them. A multinational operation. They come in, they protect cargo ships, cruise ships, take people out, deposit them in their backyards if they care so much about them. Then nobody would be starving in Gaza. Nobody would be at risk of buildings collapsing on them. But they don't want them. Yes, menage a trois. Hamas has not surrendered, and they fire back at the Israelis. So, if Ireland, and if the European Union, and if the United Nations really cared about Palestinians, they would take them in. China has room. They've got all kinds of open space in China. Why doesn't China take in 2 million Palestinians? They love them so much. Because they don't. They don't. That's the reality. Hamas should surrender forthwith. Give up their arms, surrender their arms, and surrender to Israel. And face Judgment Day. Yep, there you go. Yep. Yeah, Egypt closed their borders to Gaza the day that Israel crossed the border. Yeah, I think they closed it before that. Yep. Anyway, so that's the reality here, folks. That is the reality here. All right, it's almost midnight. I'm going to hit the rack, and I'll catch you guys tomorrow. Tonight, for those who are curious, my performance was not particularly stellar. It was okay at best. I'm, of course, my harshest critic. I could have done better, but I didn't feel well. I had some health issues just moments before I had to depart here, and did not feel well. Was nauseated, among other things, and so I had everything I could to hold it together, and actually give my 5-minute discussion there. But on the bright side, I'm getting feedback on my campaign from folks, and I've been answering the questions, and that's working out well for me. Yes, the Palestinians are the pawns of the Egyptians, of the Arabs, of the European Union, of the United Nations. Yes, let us know your next discussion. Okay, menage a trois. I'll be back tomorrow with the news. Yeah, I shut up and gave it my best, but that's not good enough. Not good enough. You want to get in the office, you've got to always do best, not give it your best. So, I mean, it wasn't bad. I mean, look, guys, it wasn't bad. I mean, if I was grading things, it'd be a B plus maybe, but I should hit an A star every time. And I didn't feel very well. But anyway, I'll survive. Yeah. And the people who are there aren't, for the most part, actually voters in this district. So they're just people that are part of a group that covers things. Well, we haven't had any debates, menage a trois. Thank you. There have been question and answer sessions. Last night was a forum. Tonight was another event. So Hamas will not wave the white flag, Shawnee. And I'll answer that before I go. So as I said from the outset, the purpose of this attack was not to inflict casualties for the sake of casualties, because it's not going to cause Israel to collapse or people to leave Israel. The purpose of this attack entirely was to show the vulnerability of Israel, number one. Number two, It was to turn world opinion against Israel. You might say, well, how would it turn world opinion? You think people would just would be really in support of Israel after October 7th. But look what Martin, the foreign minister of Ireland, did on October 7th, condemning Hamas, but telling Israel to show restraint, and also describing it as retaliation. Retaliation for what? Israel is not in Gaza. And people seem to forget that Israel provides virtually all the electricity and much of the water for Gaza. And they don't get paid for that stuff most of the time. They could have cut these people off a long time ago if they had evil intent. Not to mention hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were working every single day in Israel. They had jobs in Israel, good paying jobs, stuff they couldn't get in Gaza. So they have their source of income in Israel. They get their electricity from Israel. They get their water from Israel. And so they attack and murder Israelis. Now, you only have to look at the charter of Hamas to see that their stated goal is the extermination of the Jewish state and of Jews. End of story. How anybody can even debate this is ridiculous. It's about as dumb as ID is racist in elections. No, it's not. That's a lie. It's a lie. It's also a bigoted and racist statement to claim that. Yeah, so there you go. There you go. Now, Hamas will never wave the white flag. They are fanatics. That's exactly right. They're fanatical. They must be exterminated, Hamas, according to Israel. That's the only solution according to Israel. Not Palestinians, but Hamas, the group that invaded Israel, is what we're talking about here. Anyway, what did I miss? I don't know what you missed, Val. All right. Yeah. There you go, folks. All right, that's it. I'm out of here. Have a good night. I'm just, it's 2 minutes. That's, okay, 1 minute behind. That's 1 minute behind. It's 2 minutes to midnight, so it's time for me to hit the rack. And thank you all so much for tuning in. Do appreciate it. And we'll talk tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. By the way, if you haven't watched my video on the black journalist from the UK who was traumatized by his visit to Orania, it's such a scary place. That video is doing well. It's over 10,000 views now. Thank you all for watching that, and for the dozens of people who became subscribers. Really do appreciate that. Anyway, as always, bringing you the truth, unvarnished, hard, raw, and the analysis that goes along with it. Ireland betrays Israel tonight, and the United Nations Charter, Article 51. Have a good night, folks. Gareth Cliff, I might catch a few minutes of that before I hit the rack as well. Cheers, everybody. Have a good night, and thank you so much for being here with me tonight. Bye-bye. Really appreciate it.